Hey, it's Sterling. Welcome to another Internet Marketing Masterclass in our series of masterclasses. This is the book publishing masterclass. And this is the one where typically people are the most intimidated because for some reason people just think a book, well, that's just about impossible to do. Only special people do books. Only publishing people or, famous authors do books. Well, believe me, with something I'm going to teach you about tonight called print on demand, anybody can do a book. It's a lot easier than you think. And I want to go through the process that we used to put our own book out in a different niche last year. I'm going to show you the actual process that we followed step by step by step. This is the process that we went through. A lot of trial and error. You wouldn't believe me if I told you how much trial and error. I wish I had had a course like this. Somebody in an hour or less could tell me exactly what I needed to do. So I'm going to show you a very unique system that we developed, and it made it very, very easy. And now that we're working on other titles, it's just we're able to just crank them out. So the book publishing abilities that you have today are just amazing compared to anybody in the past. I mean, even like 3 or 4 years ago, going all the way back generations before your parents, your grandparents' generation, nobody ever had a shot, basically, of getting a book out the way we do now. So we're in a very, very special position. We're a very fortunate generation. So the masterclass objective for tonight is to learn how to harness the power of print on demand to self-publish your own book quickly and easily. So print on demand. What the heck is print on demand? Well, years ago, in order to publish a book, you needed a very large printing press that had a lot of gears and cost a lot of money and used a lot of energy, needed a lot of big roll of paper. If you've ever seen these movies or TV shows where they had to roll those huge rolls of paper onto them. And it was called gang run printing, which meant you had to do a very large quantity. I mean, just to fire up that press took a lot of time, energy, money, manpower, technology, and it didn't make sense for them to just run one little old book off of one of these huge machines. It's like firing up an entire huge factory just to make one small thing. It just didn't make cost sense for them. It was very cost prohibitive. So that really affected the economics of the book publishing world. And how do we mean it affected the economics? Well, if you were a small fish like you and I are compared to, let's say, some huge multi-million selling bestseller or something, author, well, we didn't really qualify to get the machine going because it would cost so much money just to even make a large run of these that we didn't catch their attention. And if you did happen to catch the attention of a major publishing house, then because it costs so much money to float you, to get you started, to kickstart the process, they would make sure that they gave you a very, very, very small royalty. And according to the authors I've spoken with, the publishing company would usually keep the lion's share for themselves. So that puts you in a position where, A, you probably couldn't get heard or seen enough to get your book published, and even in the unlikely event you did, you still really couldn't get, the kind of money that you could get doing self-publishing if you did a big published book in the past. And, you still had to let them do all the promotion. It's just, before the internet, it was just very, very difficult. So now, print on demand means that with the digital laser printing whole technological revolution that we're living in, companies have sprung up that can print and perfect bind books for quantities as low as one. Perfect binding means that the spine is actually just like a spine sealed up on a regular book. It's not one of these, you go to your local print shop and get some spiral bound little book like you would for a presentation for a Chamber of Commerce dinner or something, with that curly plastic thing, spine on the side. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a legitimate book that if you held it in your hands, 6x9 trade size with glossy cover, UPC barcode on it, you could not tell the difference if you didn't know which one was which between a major publishing house book and your book. There's no difference now. And because the laser and digital technologies are so much less expensive than the big machines, excuse me, you can even run quantities as low as one, and they're still doable. So this is where people talk about vanity press, where somebody writes a book and publishes it just to be vain, just to see their own one copy of it. Well, we're not saying that you should only make one copy. We're just saying that the economy of it, the economics, the cost of it has changed in such a way that now you can publish as few as one, or 5 or 10 or 20, and you don't have to purchase 10,000 at the time and have all, at one time, have all this money invested in your inventory, and then fill your garage with boxes and boxes full of your books that you don't know how to get rid of. You can have them printed on demand, right? Just in time. So you can even use the system that I'm going to show you in a little while that we use to upload your PDF version, and then when an order comes in, the system prints one. So no order, no need to print one. So you see how there's no inventory required now. It's just really, really a really great time to be alive if you're an aspiring book author. And I think that all of us, the funny thing about technology is that it changes life in certain ways. I think all of us may be more likely to be aspiring book authors if we knew how easy it can be now. So when I say to people, in a seminar, hey, raise your hands if you're an aspiring book author, if you're a person who, would one day want to write a book. Well, usually the people who raise their hands are just about the bravest and the boldest in the room, because they know, in their mind, they understand how challenging this usually has been for folks. So they're facing down those fears and saying, I think I can do it anyway. But most of the other people in the room say, yeah, that's too much trouble. I don't think I could do it. But when you tell them this is how easy it is, then you ask the question again, how many aspiring book authors do we have? Well, all of a sudden a lot more hands go up. Why? Because if I knew it was that easy, then maybe I would aspire to be one too. So I hope that this unlocks in you something deep that even if you maybe didn't think before that it was possible, you think so now. So I'm really, really excited to share this with you. So let's get into our bullet points for tonight. So we want to talk to you about how to get your book printed for a few dollars a copy with no minimums, and we already kind of discussed a little bit of that. Where to find content you can easily adapt, reuse, and make your own. How to quickly choose a topic that will sell and how to come up with a great title. How to get others to do the work for you, which is always one that everybody loves. And how to get paid to write your own book. And this is something I also revealed in the Product Creation Masterclass last week. So I really love talking about this. So let's take a look at the first bullet, how to get your book printed for a few dollars a copy with no minimums. Well, I already told you about print on demand, right? And let me make this font here a lot bigger so you can read it. All right, so print on demand, or as we call it in the business sometimes, POD, printing, is a great way to get you started. So the place that I use and I recommend is a place called CreateSpace.com. And CreateSpace is actually run by another company you might have heard of called Amazon.com. So I checked out a couple of the other ones like Lightning Source and some of these other print-on-demand spaces, and we actually went so far as to set up accounts with them and to begin the process just to test it out. But nothing was as fast and easy as CreateSpace. Now, in a very tiny, small masterclass like this, I'm not going to be able to take you through the whole entire CreateSpace account and signing up and all that stuff, because that could take a couple sessions in itself. But what I do want to do in this brief masterclass is give you the overview so that you could do it yourself if you needed to. And keep your eye on your inbox, because maybe one day I'll do a full-on 6-week coaching program like we do sometimes, specifically on this, and actually lead you through it. But the process I'll give you tonight will allow you to certainly watch this masterclass and do it yourself from home. I'm giving you everything. We're just going through it in a quicker way than we would in a huge coaching workshop kind of space. So CreateSpace is the print-on-demand publishing arm of Amazon. The reason it's great to use CreateSpace, besides the fact that it's got a very easy interface and they do excellent work and they can do the low quantities and everything we look for in a print-on-demand printer, the great thing is that they are connected to and part of Amazon. So what does that mean? That means that when you finish creating your book on CreateSpace and have it printed and sent to you, first as a proof and then all your final copies, which I'll tell you about a little bit later, you can also immediately have it listed on Amazon. So it kills two birds with one stone. It kills the production as well as the distribution. And these are the two big ends of the spectrum here, production and distribution. And before CreateSpace, it was very difficult to glue the two together. Production means you actually have a book delivered to you and it's in your hand and you have a box of them in your home or in your garage or whatever. But distribution means how do you get those copies that you have out into the real world? And even in the beginning of the print-on-demand era, which started a couple years ago, it's not brand new like this month. It's been out for in the 2000s it started. You still had a problem getting your book out. So yeah, you could make a smaller run set of copies. That's good. And it could be done digitally, so it was cheaper. That's good. But what do you do with it when you have it? You're still kind of on your own. Do you go door to door to every bookstore in town? I mean, it was still a challenge. But now with CreateSpace, you have the ability to both do production and distribution all in one fell swoop. So I'm very excited about CreateSpace. So all you need to do is get a CreateSpace account, and then when you have that set up, it's about as complicated as setting up any other account, like an Amazon account or, you know, a Hotmail account. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but not too much more. So if you've ever set up a Yahoo account or a Google account or something, it's really not that much more complicated. And another thing I love about CreateSpace is it has a very user-friendly interface. Obviously it's got a great help section. It's got a good user interface where it leads you like with a wizard. What's next? Please do this next, and when that's done, click this. But also it's got a really vibrant forum community, so you can get in there and ask questions and get them answered by other people who've already published their books. And believe it or not, I actually needed to call help a couple times at CreateSpace as we went through the process last year, and I got a person on the phone. So, will wonders never cease, right? I actually literally got a person on the phone, and they helped me with the problem. So it's pretty interesting, and I really think that Amazon's combination of presence in the market already, combined with their new easy-to-use interface for publishing your own books, it just makes it a slam dunk. There just isn't really any other reason to use anything else, right? In my opinion. So let me pull this up for a second here. Where is our, there it is. Okay, so we talked about how to get your book printed for a few dollars a copy with no minimums, and that's one of the benefits of using all print-on-demand publishers, but especially CreateSpace allows you to do that. I could order one copy right now and have it printed to myself, and I don't mean go to my own page where the book is listed and order one myself. I mean order it from within the CreateSpace account system. Order one as an author, as a publisher, not just like everybody else as a buyer. So everybody can go to your Amazon listing and buy it there, but I'm saying for you to spend a couple of dollars a copy and get your own copy anytime you want one, you could do it with no minimums. Now, for example, what if you're an author? What if you're a speaker, a consultant, somebody who has content, and maybe you're going to do a workshop, or maybe you're going to do a keynote speech or something, and you want to have books on the back table. So you could go in, and as an author, you get your discounted price. You have to buy full price like everybody else. You can order a box, 5, 10, 15, 100, and carry them over to the event or have them drop shipped over to the event, and then you just have your books there. So it's really, really cool. So where to find content you can easily adapt, reuse, and make your own? Well, we talked about this a little bit in the previous class, the product creation class, but I'm going to assume that you didn't see that, and we will go over that right now. So there's obviously a couple ways to do this. We talked about interviews last time. Interviews are a great way to get information that you don't have. So we're starting from, if you want to publish a book but you don't even have the information, there's the interview process. And now a great example of this is a book by a gentleman named Mike Littman, L-I-T-M-A-N, called Conversations with Millionaires. And I'll tell you the story of Mike's book. It's pretty interesting. Mike had a radio show, and he got a lot of different famous people to be guests on his radio show. And it wasn't a very large station. It wasn't, from my memory serves me right, from the introduction of the book. He said sometimes he didn't even know if hardly anybody was listening. It was just one of those small stations. But nobody who was, the people who were guests, their booking agents or their handlers, their agents or something, they didn't know that it was a small or a large station. They just knew it was a radio station. So Mike would get in touch and say, hey, I'd like to interview you on whatever it was, KXYZ or whatever the name of his radio station was. Would you have so-and-so be a guest on our thing, and on our show? And the guy would say yes, and then they booked the guest. So he radio interviewed these people, and I don't believe he had any intention of turning it into a book. It's just that he ended up, after a year or so, having a bunch of different interviews with famous people. And I believe if you read the introduction, you'll see he decided, well, why don't I just get these transcribed and put them into a book form? And it became a very, very high-selling, popular book, Conversations with Millionaires. I think it might have even spawned another sequel or 2 or 3. But he did that, I don't want to say backwards, but he did it from not interviews just to write a book. He did interviews just to do interviews, right? Just to start with regular old interviews for interviews' sake. Then he decided to get them transcribed. So that's one way to do it. So you could interview one person or multiple people and find out the information that you want. But let's say you already have some knowledge. Well, before we do, if you have some knowledge, let's do one other way. Another way to do it is either a ghostwriter or private label rights. So again, this is if you don't want to do the writing yourself. This kind of ties into both where to find content and also how to get others to do the work for you. It sort of bleeds over into both topics at the same time. So a ghostwriter is someone that you get specifically to help you write a book that you want to get written that they haven't written yet either, and I'll explain what that means in a second. That means that you're getting somebody to help you write something that has not yet been created. Whereas private label rights is content that has already been created specifically to be reused in private label. Private label meaning that you can put your own name on it. So the reason that I relate ghostwriters and private label rights together, you might say, well, they don't have anything to do with each other. Well, not in that way, but in the way of before the fact private label rights. That means it was written before you decided to write a book. Ghostwriter only writes it after you decide to write a book. You see the difference? So either digging up stuff that's already been done, reformatting it to be in a book. And you don't actually need a ghostwriter for that, because when you buy the private label rights to that particular content, that person just signs off on it. They said, yeah, I wrote that stuff a year ago. Here, you just pay me for the rights and you can just have it, and I don't care what you do with it, So they pre-ghost wrote it for you, is another way of saying it. Whereas a ghostwriter is somebody you would contact right away and say up front, hey, listen, I'm interested in doing a book on this. Will you help me write it, or will you write it for me or something? And usually, almost 99% of the time, that's stuff that hasn't been written yet, right? So these are another great way to find these things. And of course, there's the old-fashioned way, research. It's funny, there was a joke back in school where they said, if you copy off of a book, to do a book report, if you copy out of a book, it's plagiarism. But if you copy out of 10 books, it's called research. That was just an old college joke. But the truth is, a lot of people have written books by researching other books. Now, as long as you understand how to give proper credit using footnotes, etc., then you're okay. Be careful. Do not plagiarize. Do not ever, take anything without permission. Learn how to quote things. And that's why sometimes using book research is difficult for people, because they don't know how to attribute, which means to say, this is where I got this from. This passage comes from this other book. But if you ever see a proper nonfiction book, you'll see a quote inside of it is usually set aside, indented, maybe even in italics. It's got quotes around it. It's got a little star or a number next to it. And the footnote or the back of the book says, that particular passage comes from so-and-so's book, blah, 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 right? So they are attributing it. So you want to be careful. If you don't know how to attribute too well, then you're going to have to, write your own, or, do research and come up with putting it all in your own words. So these are some ways to get content. If you don't yet have it, you can interview people. You can hire a ghostwriter in the present time, or you can hire a ghostwriter from the past by buying private label rights content. And just Google private label rights. If you were going to write a book on how to play guitar, type in guitar private label rights, and you could find a bunch of material. You don't necessarily have to publish it as is. In fact, I would highly recommend you rewriting it and putting your own spin on it. So transcribing interviews, hiring someone to do the writing for you, either in the past or present, and doing your own research, of course, is one great way to do it. But let's say you have your own knowledge base already. You already understand what to do. You already know, if it's how to, let's say, build a birdhouse. You already know how to build a birdhouse. You don't need to find out how to build a birdhouse, but you do want to turn that knowledge into a book. So I'm going to give you my step-by-step process. We haven't released this yet. This is our proprietary process. So I'm going to go through this with you really quickly, and I think you'll be very excited about it. So first, you want to brain dump all your thoughts into bullets. Now typically, you can do this on paper, or you can do this in a notepad in your computer or something. But I personally enjoy using a program called MindNode on the Mac. See, MindNode Pro. I don't know if you can see that down here. But you can also get free mind mapping software either on the Mac or on the PC. And I just make a little window, a little card on the mind mapping, and for each thought I have, I just dump each one onto its own unique card, kind of like a virtual index card, right? So it's real easy to do a dump. Just dump everything out that you know. You have to gather your wood together. Okay, so gather wood. That's one of your cards. Another card could be, decide which kind of bird you're going to build your birding house for, etc., etc. They don't even have to be in any order. Just dump out everything you know, bullet by bullet. So a bullet just means one unique piece of thought, one thought that can't be divided any smaller than it is. And for some people, this is super easy. They just get started. They just start writing and boom, boom, boom. They make a whole bunch of cards. Other people feel the need to try to organize this process up front. They feel like they need to write the book, but writing the book is not for right now. This is just dumping your thoughts into bullets. So you do this in any order that it comes out of your brain, but don't try to edit. Just dump your stuff out of your head. So you can go randomly, or you can go in order, but don't be afraid to just put another card in there. Oh yeah, by the way, remind people about this. You should paint it this color. Blah, blah. Just whatever way you can. It doesn't matter. And don't worry about getting it into a right order right now, because then you're moving on to a different step. So once you'll see all these different steps, you'll realize that we're splitting everything apart into as small a step as possible. So right now you're not trying to write full sentences. You're not trying to edit it for good spelling or grammar. That's later steps. I just want you to dump those thoughts out and scribble them down, right? Birdhouses are fun to make. A birdhouse has 3 parts. It's important to use non-toxic glue, right? These are perfect examples, and they're not in any particular order at all. They're just there, right? So next, you want to organize your bullets into subject clusters. And subject clusters mean that there's a main thought surrounded by several other thoughts. So, for example, this little thought right here, this white square on the upper left of the screen, might be a subject cluster called assembling your materials. Because you'll notice that this card here, this black line, says get your wood. This one says get your nails and your glue. This one says how to get your paint. This one says some other stuff. And they all kind of cluster around the same similar area called getting your materials together, right? There might be 5 or 10 or 20 bullets about painting. Well, then cluster those around the painting section, you see? Then maybe history of birdhouses and choosing which bird to build it for. You'll just naturally see that your subjects will cluster together, right? If you're using index cards, just spread them around on the table, but start to divide these up into different clusters as they suggest themselves to you. Now, the next stage is where you're going to start to put them into order. So what the heck is a chrono cluster? Well, it's just a made-up word I have. Chrono means chronology or chronological order, and cluster is obviously from last time, clusters. So you're going to take your subject clusters now. Let's say you have a couple different subject clusters. Maybe perhaps I gave an example down here. No, okay. So we talked about assembling your materials. Then we talked about painting, and you might have 5 cards about assembling your materials, but 22 cards about painting. That's fine, it doesn't matter. But first, you assemble your main sections in order. For example, you're going to want to put your assembling your materials together, going and shopping and buying all your materials and assembling them all together to be ready to build. That subject cluster obviously comes before painting the birdhouse, because you don't even have a birdhouse to paint yet. You're still assembling your materials. So clearly, assemble all your materials together comes before the cluster of paint your birdhouse, right? You can see how one follows from the other. It's just like a story, First boy meets girl, then boy loses girl. You can't have boy loses girl before boy ever meets girl. It's out of order. So you have to put these subject clusters into the best order that you think they should be in. Don't overstress on any of these steps. Just let them naturally suggest themselves to you in the order that seems right. You still have time to change the order, but assemble first the subject clusters together into the right order. Then inside of each particular subject cluster, you want to put the steps or the cards, the subcards, in order as well. So if we're talking about, let's say, subject cluster number 4, you decided was going to be the paint your birdhouse one, because it's assemble the materials, design your birdhouse, build the wood, and then step number 4 would be paint. That's your order so far. Well, inside of the paint cluster, you've got a bunch of different sub bullets, and those bullets are maybe paint the roof, paint the sides, paint the bottom, paint the inside, whatever it is, right? So now you have to find out what order you want those to go in. So you might say, well, the order is I paint the bottom, then you paint the sides and the front, and then you paint the top. Okay, so then organize those little bullets as well. So what you've done is in this step, you've actually done 2 steps. You've organized the main sections into a chronology that you like, and then you've also organized each individual bullet inside of those sections into a chronology that you like. And that is your preliminary chronocluster. The whole thing together in that order is a chronocluster. So let's take a look at step 4, reviewing and locking your preliminary chronocluster into your chronocluster final. So now that you've got your preliminary chronocluster together, that means that you've got your sections in order and you've got all the bullets inside of those sections also in order. This is preliminary. This means for that particular time you did it, that was your best shot. It doesn't mean it's a final lock yet. It just means that that's the way it felt the best to put together. So you put it away in your drawer of your desk for a couple days, and maybe even give it to some other people who know how to build birdhouses as well, and then you take another look at it. The more eyes on it at this point, the better. Remember, it's not a full book. You're not asking anybody to look at your book. It's more like an outline. So if you're at this stage thinking, well, I have to get all my sentences perfected before I give it to somebody, we haven't gotten to that step yet. So don't, if you're doing that, you've moved ahead too far. This is just preliminary bullets as we showed you earlier. Birdhouses are fun to make. A birdhouse has 3 parts, right? Use non-toxic glue. This is as complicated as it is at this step. It's really, really just your basic bullets. You can flesh out these bullets later when we get to that stage and sententize them, as I will teach you a little bit later. But right now, all you're doing is trying to go from a preliminary chronocluster lock, from a preliminary chronocluster into a chronocluster final and lock that in. So now that the section is, you've done this step, take any feedback from anybody else, or if you're just doing it by yourself, rearrange these a little bit. Make sure that you like the layout, the chronology that you have so far. And when you like it, when you feel that this is the right order to go to, I have painting the birdhouse after assembling your materials where it belongs, and I have all the different steps inside of each step. I like it like this. This I can say is now finalized. So you lock it, and there you go, right? At that stage, by the way, you may find that you have some that you're just not sure where they go. So you can even take them out for a while now and maybe save them for later. Not everything even that you dump out in your brain dump has to go into your book, by the way. So let's take a look at the next step. Exporting your chronocluster final into a bullet outline. Now, if you've done this via mind mapping, which I highly suggest you attempt to do, and there are free mind mapping tools, like I said, then usually you can find an export to text file function. That means that somewhere inside of your program, you go export to file, export to text, save as txt or save as doc, something like that. You'll have to look in your unique program. When I use MindNode Pro here on the Mac, I think it costs $20 or something. It just has a very easy function where I can take that mind map and export it into text. So whatever way you have to do it, even if you're doing index cards, let's say, then you would finalize this into one outline. You can write it by hand, type it into Word doc or whatever. So that's your bullet outline. Now, from the bullet outline, you're going to want to sententize your bullets and turn it into a preliminary book flow. So sententize is a word I made up, and it's just a word that means to turn your bullets into sentences. So let's go back for a second to stage 1 where I showed you some of the little fake bullets we have about our pretend birdhouse book. For me, I might have written non-toxic glue. That might be my only bullet line for it. Glue type, or non-toxic glue, or remember to use non-toxic glue. So that's not really a sentence, that's just kind of a thought. It's like a placeholder thought. It floats around in my head, non-toxic glue, because I don't want the birds to be hurt by toxic glue. So now it's time to sententize that. So I might actually write out the full sentence of, when building a birdhouse, it's important to use non-toxic glue because birds' health will be affected if you use toxic glue. Or, to prevent your birds from having an injury, or being killed or something, use non-toxic glue on all exposed surfaces. You can find this non-toxic glue at your local birdhouse supply store, period, right? Do you see how I took a little tiny bullet and turned it into actually a sentence? I sentencized that bullet. So another bullet, just to give you one more example, might say color choosing. Let's just say it's color choosing, because I know that there's something I want to say about choosing the color of your birdhouse. So for the bullet of my brain dump, I might just write down choosing colors. But the sentencized version might be, a great way to choose colors is to keep in mind the area that you're going to be having your birdhouse in. If you want it to be camouflage, choose brown and green. But if you're doing it for robins, robins really enjoy red, so make sure you make it red, period. Something like that. I've sentencized that bullet. So already you've got this order, remember. All of this point one, section 1, section 2, section 3, etc. And each one of your little bullet points inside there. When you have all that and you sentencize it, each bullet turns into a sentence, then you end up with a preliminary book flow. And a book flow means this is the actual flow of the text as it will appear in your book. Now, it's still preliminary, right? It doesn't mean you are locked into it. And one of the reasons I love this turning your ideas into a book process that I teach you here in this masterclass, one of the reasons I love it so much is at each stage it allows you to bend and change and move and gives you freedom. The biggest mistake people make when trying to write a book is sitting down with a blank piece of paper or a blank screen, beginning with the first word, and somehow miraculously expecting themselves to, word by word, line by line, dump out, right out of their heads, a completed, finished book in completed, finished flow format from first word to last word, as if such a thing is possible. Now, could it be possible? 1 out of 1,000 cases, I'm sure. But that's not the way usually these things are done. People take notes, they store them on index cards, they have pieces of paper. So I'm trying to make these steps as isolated and small as possible. So it's very easy to move from one step to the next. And you can always go backwards in steps if you need to go back and say, now that I'm about to put this into a preliminary book flow, I just don't like the way these two sections go together. So that's okay. You could scroll back and go back to the before the lock, before the chronocluster lock, and change them around. So I hope you see how powerful and easy this system is because it breaks everything down into such detail. Don't think you have to sit and write the whole book from start to finish in an afternoon on a legal pad, okay? It just doesn't usually work that way. So once you've got your preliminary book flow, this is actually a readable flow, You don't want to rewrite too much. Just try to do this step as fast as possible because now you review it. Do you remember how we did that before? First you preliminary do something and then you review it for locking later. Most people try to do the same thing, do both steps at the same time. It's very difficult because let me tell you about the different sides of your brain. The right side of your brain, they say, is your creative side. It's very wild west and it's kind of just amorphous. This is where all your ideas float around. It's very creative, but it's not very structured. The left side of your brain is where it's very organized and linear and structured. However, it's not very creative, right? So dumping and creating and coming up with stuff, that's a very right brain skill. Coming up with things, right? So things like a brain dump or a sentencizing, these are very creative right brain skills. But then things like organizing in chronology or reviewing and locking a preliminary book flow into a final book flow, editing, that's very left brain. So trying to do the right brain side of the equation at the same time that you're doing the left brain side of the equation, being creative and critical at the same time, is about as easy as putting your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time and expecting your car to go somewhere. Do you see how they kind of work against each other? So when it's right brain time, turn off your left brain. Don't worry about if it makes any sense. Let it go. Do not try to critically analyze and edit at the same time you're writing. This is the complaint I get from everybody I teach this to. Well, when I'm writing, I'm always thinking, well, that sounds stupid. Well, that doesn't sound any good. That's not a complete sentence. Yeah, because that's the left brain. That's the left side of your brain, the critic, who's trying to interrupt the artist side who's just working. So you have to let the artist say, hey, critic, shut up for a while. Let me just do my job. Let me just dump out a bunch of stuff. When I'm done, then you can take over. I'll shut up and you can come in and do the editing and maneuvering and moving it all around and trimming and all that stuff. But if you try to edit with that critical voice while you're trying to, do creative work, that's what makes it almost impossible, because you're trying to put your foot on the gas and brake at the same time. I hope that makes sense. So now that you've turned off your right brain, because you know your right brain here is what you're using here in step 6 in sentencizing. Right brain, how do I creatively turn this bullet into a sentence? Okay, so that's a right brain task. When that's done, you can turn off your right brain, move to your left brain, and review this for flow, grammar, all that stuff. And then when you have a final lock here, when you think, okay, this reads well, there's your book flow final. You'll notice here that it says editor. You can use the services of an editor if you'd like. I also recommend, as we did before in that previous step, to make sure you have a couple people look at it. And now this, they can actually read as if it is a book. You see? Because it has sentences now. So before, when you were going to let people review just your, chronocluster, just your cluster of sections and bullets, you kind of have to pick carefully who you're going to have look at that. Because if a person's not too savvy or sophisticated, and you give them that, you say, hey, I'd like you to review my book, and then you hand them an outline, they'll say, well, this isn't a book, this is just an outline. You expect to put this out? This has just got bullet points. You have to say, I know, I'm trying to let you see something that's pre-book flow. It's not there yet. I'm asking you to judge the flow of the information, or what we call the information architecture. It's not a full book yet, and I know that. I'm telling you to just review it for flow, not for actual words. But now we're talking about the review and locking prelim book flow into the book flow final. We are reviewing it like it is a book, so that's the difference between those two steps. Now we go to layout, laying out your book flow final into your preliminary layout. So book flow means, excuse me, the word choices, the sentence choices. If you were reading it out loud, that's the book flow. If I put my eyeballs on word number 1, move them all the way down to the end of the book to the final word, that's the flow, the book flow. But it's not necessarily laid out on pages. It could be written on one long scrolling piece of paper, or if you had like a really, really long wall, you could just write it in magic marker all along, one long line on the wall. It's not laid out in any particular fashion. It's just a flow of words. But you're going to take that flow of words, called the book flow final, now that you've locked it in and you like it, and turn it into a prelim layout. And usually this is where you would utilize the resources of a layout designer. We certainly did. And although you can learn book layout design, I don't really see the benefit in you spending a lot of time, energy, and money learning how to do something that only takes a couple hours for a pro to do. It only costs, $100, $200, $300, depending on how long your book is. So I would definitely use the services of a layout designer. And it's easy to just go to an outsourcing place like Odesk or something, or just Google book layout or book design or layout design or something like that. And or book self-publishing assistance, things like that. And you'll have somebody lay it out. You'll notice from the picture here that you have 2 pages, one on each side, you see? So the book flow is just the text. You might have a Word doc, let's say, with 100 pages, meaning page after page after page in a long up and down sequence. But a book has a left page and a right page, and then you turn the page and there's another left page and a right page. So you can clearly see how book flow is not sufficient for a book. You have to now lay it out in the page by page format. So have somebody do that for you, or if you're already really good at that, do it yourself. And now you do a review lock for this. They return to you your preliminary layout, and you look at that, and usually you can look at that through, like for example, they'll give you an Adobe PDF document or something, and you can view it with 2 pages, one next to each other. So right now, for example, I'll use this. I'm in Adobe Viewer right now, so let me show you. If I went to View, Page Display, and did 2-page view, you can see that there's a left page with step 9 on it, and a right page with step 10 on it. Now this is not laid out for a book, by the way. This is just an digital book, so it's not really laid out properly for a book. But I'm just showing you that they will return it to you in a way that has 2 different pages that will look similar to this. So you'll see that the words will go down to the bottom here. So for example, the last word on this page is unfinished. So if I turned this page on the right all the way over to the left, it would then have this page next, right? See? So that's how that works. And if it doesn't make sense, just have them explain it to you when they return it to you. You'll see right away that it's actually pretty easy to understand. Zoom back in here. So we're back to what we were doing before. So you're reviewing your preliminary layout. Again, feel free to have other people look at this. Also have an editor look at it, because there's still time to change things. For example, everybody might have missed that a sentence on page 52 reads funny. Well, you haven't done a final lock yet, so you can go backwards in steps and change that, because this is also available in a Word doc format. Maybe they give it to you and you go in Word doc and edit it. Or maybe you just print it out, make circles on it with a red pen and fax it back to them, or FedEx it or something. Or you can just look at it on the Adobe like it is here on the PDF version, and then maybe take a text file and write page 52, change the sentence, right? So that you can loop this step as many times as possible. They return you the second round of changes. This is prelim layout revised, first version. And it's still not ready for lock. You find some other problems, you send it back again with the changes. So you might go through 3, 4, 5 rounds till you have the preliminary layout the way you want it, so that now you can lock it as the final layout. And now it's locked. So now you have your locked layout. So what have we done? We've made sure that you have all of the bullets in your brain dumped out. You have them organized into into clusters, then the clusters into sequences, and then the bullets themselves into sequences. Then you've sentencized those. Then you've put that sentencized version into the hands of somebody that can lay it out as a layout. And now that you've reviewed it all, you've done a lot of different steps before you're actually ready to go get it sent to be printed. But even now, it may not be correct. And there are so many things, little tiny tweaks and errors and bugs and missing commas or periods or capitalizations or whatever, that invariably there are a lot of phases or a lot of stages of revision here. So don't be surprised if you go through a lot of this here, because that's just part of the process. And let me tell you, I'm looking at my shelf here in the office, and there are many books that I've paid, $25 full price major publishing house for, and I found 3 or 4 or 5 glaring stupid errors, typos and things like that. And these people have, 6-figure paid editors on staff. Well, because it happens. Stuff slips through, and they correct and revise things in multiple editions. So, if the publishing houses are still letting little problems, sneak by, it just happens in the book publishing industry. It's not the end of the world, and so don't worry about it if you have a whole bunch of revisions, because some of you that are more, super organized types out there, you're going to get really frustrated and stressed. This is taking too long. This shouldn't have this many errors. It's okay. It does. That's the way it works. It may be painful for you, but it happens like that. So now that you've got your layout final, you have your layout designer or yourself upload it to CreateSpace and have them print out a proof, a draft copy. That means that they send you one physical copy called a proof for you to approve of whether or not you like it. So it's not the final version. You don't just take that layout and send it up to them and have them return to you 100 copies. Why? Because if there's a typo or a goof, you just made 100 times of it. So this is your test version to go through it. Now you actually physically have a book in your hands when they return it to you, so you can turn the pages, hold it, look at it. When you passed around your outline, or when you passed around your book flow, or even if you passed around your layout, that was all just on paper, stapled paper. This is the first time you actually have a book in your hands. So again, get a couple copies, have your friends look at it. You'll probably go through a round or 2 or 3 of this, but finally, when you've approved this proof, when you have reviewed and locked this proof and said, okay, this layout version is correct, then you have your book final. Again, you can use the resources of an editor for this, and you take that book final, upload it to CreateSpace, and then, because you've checked it a bunch of times, it should be ready to go. And then you can order, a bunch of copies and pretty much feel confident that they're ready to go. Now, are you going to make sure you eliminate all the errors? I'll be surprised, because almost always, invariably, something sneaks through. But it's not that big of a deal, because, you've just you've done your best, and that's all you could do. I've even seen somebody they made a little piece of paper they stuck in there, and they said, "This is still our first version, even though we've approved it. If you find a typo of any kind, I'll give you $1 for everybody who gives me a typo or something. Make a little contest out of it. If you have a list of subscribers, send them to your list, or have them ask some people there if they want to preliminary review it for you. And anybody who goes through it and finds errors gets a free copy of the book, or maybe you give them something else, a free session or something if you're a consultant. So that's basically the whole format in a nutshell of how we do what we do here. And I think I've answered the question of how to get your book printed, where to find the content, and how to get others to do the work for you. So what we've left ourselves with is how to quickly choose a topic that will sell, and how to come up with a great title, and of course how to get paid to write your own book. So how to choose a topic that will sell and how to come up with a great title are two different but related things. So choosing a topic that will sell, the easiest way to do this is to choose a topic that will sell by looking at what sells already. So you can go to Amazon, and if you wanted to write a book and you already had a topic, then you're halfway there. You can just double check to make sure that you have a market for it. Look, maybe you want to write a book about the history of dirt, and nobody's interested in it but you, and you don't care if it sells. Well, then skip this step, right? It doesn't matter. Knock yourself out and make yourself happy. But if you're saying to yourself, I want to make sure I invest my time, energy, and money in a topic that I have at least some degree of confidence that it'll sell, then take a look at what's already selling. Just go to Amazon and type in different books and take a look, or go to your local bookstore and take a look at what's there, and find out, especially if you can, what the sales stats are. So for example, if you've got 2 books about the same topic on Amazon, and one of them has 3 reviews and the other one has 350 reviews, well, at least one of them is selling very well. So that's one way to do it. Another way to choose a topic that will sell is if it hasn't been published yet, but you have a following or an audience or some group of people that that are out there that will purchase this. You may know something that somebody just hasn't published yet. Also, you may be the very best representative of your audience. So even if you don't know anybody personally, you know yourself, and you know that, hey, if I'm into this, there's a very good chance that somebody else is as well. So it really depends on whether or not you're that interested in selling it. Sometimes people just, hey, I wrote a nonfiction story, and I really want to get it out and get copies of it and get it online so people can buy it. And you don't know if it's going to sell. You don't know if it's something people will want or not. But do your best and check as much as you can. So how do you come up with a great title? Well, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. We talked a little bit about this before in product creation. But if it's nonfiction, here's a great way. Start with how to, if it's a how to. And usually the people that I teach this to, this is mostly where they live in this area. They want to, write down a how to do something. So I like how to, blah, blah. 7 steps to, do this thing, something like that, quickly and easily, right? Something. And there's a lot of information on titling your book on Google. There's even a lot of forum posts in CreateSpace about how to do that. But I like how to, and I like some kind of numerical value here. Another thing you might want to consider for titling your book is, you can blah, blah. You can even try blah, blah in 7 easy steps. One thing you don't want to do is use Idiot's Guide or something like that to blah, blah, because they have a trademark on that. Believe it or not, you see a lot of people try to write a title, The Idiot's Guide to Cooking, or Cooking for Dummies. Well, for Dummies is already a trademarked thing. They're going to sue you probably for, confusion in the marketplace. You're not one of their official dummies authors. So you might say, instead of blah blah for dummies, you might say for regular people, or for first timers, or for even non-professionals. I always spell that wrong. Or even one more for you, for the rest of us, slash for everybody else, right? So building model railroads for the rest of us is, something that you might consider. So if it's fiction, knock yourself out. Doesn't matter, because you can name it anything you want. But for coming up with a great title, there are different little formulas like this that work very well. Remember to keep it you focused and keep it benefit heavy. So maybe write your book in 30 days, 7 steps to instantly, publish your first book quickly and easily, something like that, right? I just pulled that off the top of my head, but there's the main title, write your book in 30 days. That's a benefit. It's not, I'm a great author and I'll show you how to do it. It's not be a great author like me. It's you write your book in 30 days. 7 steps to instantly publish your first book quickly and easily. That's very beneficial. It's a benefit. What am I gonna do? Publish my first book. It's gonna be quick and easy. Why? Because there are 7 steps to do it. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can go from there. Do some more research on the CreateSpace forums if you need to. And now for the final touch, which I really get excited about, it's how to get paid to write your own book. Well, here's how to do it. Sell tickets. So what the heck does that mean, sell tickets? Well, for example, in the product creation class I told this story as well. I knew a guy who wanted to write a book, so he gave himself 20 weeks or something. And of course he had a list, so this is easier for some people to do than others, but I'm sure you can figure something out and work on this little bonus tip for yourself. He had a list, and so he sold a 20-week coaching program on how to write your own book. He said, I will bring in my chapters, my 20 chapters, 1 chapter a week, and then when I bring in mine every week, you can see it, you can download it, look at it, and I will help you write your own that week. We can kick around what you've done, and then you'll bring your chapter in the next week when I already have my next one. So he sold tickets to this coaching group, this action group, program group, whatever you want to call it, coaching program, and had people pay him to watch him, watch his process of doing his book. And when he was done, he had a book, and of course that book sold. So he got paid to write it, and then got paid again to sell it. He got paid twice. So you can always sell seats, if you will, sell tickets to the act of you writing your own book. That's a great way to get paid to write it. I would also consider, maybe as you write your book, consider doing a product on how you are doing writing your book, how you wrote it. Now, don't steal any of my stuff here. You can use your own words, but your way, what you did, is your story, and you can tell your story. That can be put into a product, and you can sell that as well if you're interested in doing that. So hopefully this book publishing masterclass gave you the basics and the higher end tactics and techniques that you need to get your book started. But above all, you have to get it started. You don't have to get it perfect. You have to get it started. And the way to get it started is to just go to step 1 and get down here. Oops, froze that up a little bit. Well, doing the brain dump is the important thing. So you remember what that slide looks like, because my Adobe locked up just now. So definitely start dumping that material out. Whatever way you need to do it, index cards, paper, I don't care. Oh, good, it's back. Let's move here. There you go. That's the first step. Brain dump all your thoughts into bullets, whether it's index cards or a mind mapping software. That's what I want you to do first. The quicker you get started doing that, the faster you'll be on your way to publishing your own book, and I really look forward to seeing it. So this is Sterling Valentine. I hope you get your book done, and when you do, let me know about it. Talk to you soon.